Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sharon Suzuki. I'm president of Maui Electric Company. I wanted to thank you for making the time tonight to join us for a very interesting topic. It's our community forum on energy resilience. I think many of us have heard the term resilience, and you may be wondering, well, why is Maui Electric doing this? So we've been serving Maui County for nearly 97, 98 years, since 1921. And we've taken our responsibility for providing electrical service reliably to everyone very seriously as we transformed from an agricultural community to where we are now, reaching towards a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2045. But one thing, we take our commitment seriously, and as we've seen recently with severe weather and storms affecting different areas, including our county, it reminds us of the possible impacts of climate change on our island communities. And energy reaches every sector of this community and all of the residents who live here. So we thought that hosting a forum on this topic would be a great idea to get the community together and to hear different aspects or perspectives on the topic. As an island community, and we know that to get to 100%, we can't do it alone. We need to work together with government officials, both private and public sectors, to make sure that everyone's needs are met. So tonight, in conjunction with High Performance Energy Resilient Communities, also known as HyperCom, we wanted to put on this forum. I'm happy to now introduce the founder and lead researcher of the coalition HyperCom, Alex DeRode, who will offer some comments and will also be on our panel this evening. So Alex.
Thank you, Sharon. Hello, everybody. Good evening. So for just my opening remarks, I wanted to give you a whirlwind tour of what is energy resilience and what is hazard mitigation, and what do those two things have to do with one another. And I'm really just going to give a very brief, high-level overview. So what is hazard mitigation and what is energy resilience? So the best type of disaster we can ask ourselves would be the one that never happened, right? And how do we avoid those disasters from happening? One key approach is prevention and mitigation, right? Not focusing only on response, how do we respond to a disaster event, natural disasters, for example, but how do we prevent and mitigate the impacts of those? So one way to see that is your risk when faced with a natural disaster could be expressed as the hazard itself times the vulnerability that we, for example, as a community have in the face of that disaster, divided by the coping capacity of our community to cope with that disaster. What we're doing in these processes is trying to first identify the hazards, assess the vulnerabilities, and then plan and implement resiliency measures. And it's very difficult to control hazards, right? We can't block hurricanes from running into our island. But what can we do to reduce the impact that that hurricane could have? Right? Much easier to control where we live, how we plan, how we build. So some key words related to community resilience is anticipating risk, limiting impact, bounce back rapidly from in the post-disaster scenario, and again requires proactive mitigation and planning. Said otherwise, we want to prepare, we want to respond and recover from natural disasters. A critical part of that is how do we restore essential services or lifelines, and I know Carlos coming up will be talking more about that as well. How do we get our citizens back to work? How do we reopen schools and businesses quickly and safely? Again, that comes down to pre-disaster planning and mitigation. It's kind of two different ways of thinking about resilience. You can think of it as how do we adapt to adversity, right? So we have an impact, something that happens to our community. How do we change the way we do things as a result of that? Versus how do we resist it, right? Resist the change from occurring. And both of those have their pros and cons, and we kind of need to use both of those approaches optimize how we're addressing hazards and disasters. This is a study from the National Institute of Building Sciences, some results showing that when pre-disaster mitigation efforts are funded either by the federal government or by looking at building above standard building code, we see a return, a benefit cost ratio for every dollar invested, $6 in benefit from federal funding awarded. For every dollar invested, $4 in benefit from building above just minimum code requirements. Some ways we can increase the resiliency of our energy systems here in our community. There's a plethora of technologies, of different strategies. I just have a short list here. But these are some of the things that are being explored by our community, by our utility, by independent power producers. And these are some of the solutions that are going to come together to help us become more resilient. So resilient power, what do we mean by that? It's power that's continuous, reliable, even when the grid is down. It's clean, renewable, and it has an ability to provide community benefits year-round. So not just during disaster events, but also when we're not facing a disaster, that those energy systems still provide benefit to the community. Again, coming back to this idea of supporting critical community lifelines, but also providing additional benefits to the community. So some of those critical lifelines that we're familiar with, but how energy interconnects with all of those would be telecommunications, transportation, water. All of these other areas have a nexus with energy and rely on energy to function. Another part of this resiliency is community, and thinking beyond just our local community, but being part of a larger community and network that you can rely on in times of need. We have an example of that just recently here, where through the Western Regional Mutual Assistance Group, we have HECO, MECO, and HELCO crews going out to help Butte County with their fire disaster recovery. All right, so it's mutual. When we have disasters here where we need help, they can come and help our community. So that's my brief overview of energy resilience and hazard mitigation. I want to thank you for being here tonight, and I'll introduce Mahina Martin, who's the manager of community relations for Maui Electric Company, and she's going to be our moderator this evening. Thank you.
So I just wanted to let you know that tonight is going to be a great beginning, and you'll have a chance to hear from many perspectives. We're going to have two next speakers, and up next, a gentleman who is the Director of Applied Science from Pacific Disaster Center. It's a very critical organization. PDC, as they're known, or Pacific Disaster Center, was created following some very devastating effects from Hurricane Iniki to Hawaiian Islands. And that was back in 1992. But since then, the Pacific Disaster Center has made a lot of ground in improving our systems of communication and our technologies for disaster safety, both here as well as beyond us. So PDC is now serving a very global audience and has done some incredible work to increase disaster management capacity and helping us reach some good decision making and procedures and collectively as well. So here from Pacific Disaster Center is Carlos Viasi. I had to practice that one, Viasi. But please welcome Carlos to the podium as he shares some thoughts with you from the perspective of Pacific Disaster Center.
Good evening, thank you, aloha, and thank you very much. When Alex came maybe 8 months ago to my office to discuss about doing something like this, you know, we started just dreaming ideas and planning things, and now I'm very excited to see, you know, that many people are engaged and supporting these ideas. And we are very grateful to MECO, of course, for their support and engagement. And we hope that everybody will support these ideas that benefit everybody. So here, just I would like to introduce three pillars of the philosophy behind this project, how we think that this will be something that will produce something long-lasting solutions and benefits. So a short introduction to that. So first, the overall approach. The idea of this is to develop solutions, not just produce a report, not produce maps, not produce a study, but try to reach to the solutions, and in a positive way. We need to understand that risk changes all the time. It's a dynamic thing. So the initial conditions when the whole system were initiated are not there anymore. Everything has changed. There has been planning decisions, investment decisions that have changed the risk, augmented or reducing the risk in several locations. There have been advances in technologies that usually help to reduce the risk. There have been changes in nature. We have different natural conditions in the human conditions, demography, the demographics, the economy, the level of development. Many things have changed, and the risk is changing continuously. Also, we need to understand that many of the facilities and the critical infrastructure in Maui was designed and built when disaster risk management was not an integral part of urban planning, or when we didn't understand as much as we know and now understand on natural extreme events or how to build resilience. And at the time, the community needs and priorities were different from what they are now. So definitely, the first thing that we need is to understand the situation. This is the scenario of what will happen with a tsunami due to an earthquake in Alaska, and we see that critical infrastructure here is where we have, for instance, the power station. Will be covered. The road going to West Maui will be affected. Here we have the port, the airport. All of that is affected. And when we were designing those things were not in the minds of many people. So that's the reality. And we need to understand how things have changed. And based on that understanding, develop effective, widely supported by everybody, solutions that can manage the risk properly. To reach that understanding, we need to perform a comprehensive analysis, and this means we need to understand the dynamic characteristics of the risk. Many things have changed. We see, for instance, we are reporting natural events all over the world, and we see a clear increase in frequency and severity of the meteorological events, for instance, all over the world. We can see with our own eyes, the impact of coastal erosion. Everything is changing. Our coasts are changing, and it's completely different. There is always the concern about sea level rise. So all of those things are changing all the time, and we need to understand the human conditions have changed also. The economy is different. The population, the developments are different all the time. So things are changing. Here's an example, for instance. What will happen if the sea level rises up 2 feet? And we see again, these critical facilities, the roads here, the port, affected by these things, So we need to consider all of these things when doing and trying to understand the risk of our system. Also, when doing the analysis, we need to understand that this system is a network, a widely spread network. It's different from the analysis to a school or a building or a hospital. If a critical element of this system is affected, the whole system is affected. And so it's a much more complex type of analysis. So we need to understand that. We need to understand the levels of redundancy in the system to understand how vulnerable it is. So this is an example, for instance, of different key components of the system, the overhead lines, the transformer generators. each of them have different vulnerabilities depending on the type of hazard. It's not the same for earthquakes than for a hurricane or floods. So we need to consider all of these things to select carefully the most critical elements of the system for the analysis and choose the most risky and probable scenarios to have a good understanding of the risk. And these are some examples of assessments that we have done. This is what will happen with the maximum tsunami that is considered for Hawaii, a tsunami coming from Alaska. And this is the impact to the building stock. And these are the estimated losses for that. In the case of Maui, it's $4.5 billion only in building stock. 9% of the building stock will be lost to this scenario. We also try to provide, what will be the impact to the people. These are products that we generated for the Hurricane Florence in September in South Carolina, on the East Coast. There we estimated that, for instance, that 3.4 million people will be affected. But of those 3.4 million, 670,000 will be children younger than 15 years old, that are more vulnerable people, or almost 500,000 people elder than 65 years old, that are most vulnerable people, and we need to understand the things. And we need to understand what their needs, how much food, water, shelter is needed to attend to their needs. We also can estimate, for instance, the people under the poverty level, people that are more vulnerable and we need longer assistance than other sectors of society. So putting numbers to those things will help us to make better decisions. Another example for the same hurricane, this is what the impact to the energy, to the power supply system. This is the number on September 15 at 4 p.m., the number of people without electricity, and in each of the areas, and how that compares to the situation in the morning, 8 hours before. So we can track and see how the process is, recovery process is advancing, and make decisions accordingly. The final thing that we thought will be important to get positive results and long-lasting solutions is for this to be a joint effort, engaging all the players in this work. So for the estimation of the damage and the loss of functionality, probably we will need to work with MECO, with not only with them, but there are many emergency supplies, generators, for instance, that many times they are in the hands of private people, and we need to take into account those things. Or also the solar energy system, all of them are part of the same energy system, so we need to work with all of them to understand. But in terms of the impact and what can be done to reduce the effects for mitigation, response, and recovery, we have to engage the authorities who are the ones dealing with policy, regulations, budgeting. We need to engage the other lifeline systems, like water supply, like transportation, like telecommunications. They don't work without electricity. And they need to know, they need to be part of these things. We need to engage the end users, the private sector, the public sector. They are the ones to be affected by all of these things, and they need to be part of the solution. And we need to engage the community, the whole community. If the whole community doesn't support this effort, it's much more difficult to implement any recommendation or any solution that may be proposed. This requires a very effective communication strategy to reach everybody, and this is the first step, bringing everybody to know about these efforts. At the end, what we want, as I said before, is long-term, effective, affordable, and locally supported solutions. That we don't want one-time effort or quick fixes. We would like to build something that will last in the long term. So this is basically the philosophy behind all of this work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. Our next person that we wanted to bring forward is the head or the administrator of the Maui Emergency Management Agency. In 1950, we started the civil defense. But happy birthday, because 2 years ago today, the 29th, is today 29th? Yeah. Maui County voted to change the name from civil defense to kind of modernize it and bring it up to speed. And so now it's known as the Maui Emergency Management Agency, or MEMA. So today marks the second year of the existence of MEMA. And here with us tonight is the administrator. He's the guy that tells us what to do when there's a disaster, or we look at him and say, we're doing it anyway, or not. But please welcome Herman Andaya. Herman?
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this forum. I was told to talk about our agency, the importance of preparation, and what we as members of this community can do to help each other during a crisis. Over the years, the field of emergency management has expanded significantly, and the process to which we address these emergencies have grown increasingly complex. In today's forum, you will hear the term resilience used extensively by our speakers. In recent times, the term resilience has become a buzzword in the field of emergency management, and it highlights the importance of the community's ability to bounce back from an emergency. Our agency also recognized the importance of promoting community resilience by updating our mission statement to include the term resilience. As you can see from our mission statement, the word resilience was included, and now the buzzword now is whole community resiliency. The history of emergency management stemmed from civil defense, as Mahina had mentioned, and our agency that was primarily created to protect and prepare U.S. civilians from the possibility of a foreign attack. So this here is the old logo of our agency. And over time, the likely threats to our community has changed. And here you see a list of all the different types of threats that may come to the state. The top, on the far left, hurricane, tsunami, earthquake, flash flood, cyber attack, landslide, pandemic influenza, wildfire, power failure, aircraft incident, volcano, urban fire, hazmat, tornado, dam failure, radiological accident, terrorism, and drought. So as you can see, it's no longer just about attacks from foreign nations. Now we're talking about all kinds of different threats. And so that's the reason why our agency had to change its name so that it would reflect the types of emergencies that we address. And so because of that, as we had mentioned, our name was changed in 2016, and that's our new logo as of this year. The Maui Emergency Management Agency is a County of Maui agency with only 6 staff members, including myself. Our role is to coordinate the efforts of various agencies in addressing all phases of an emergency. And this is the other agencies within the state that's also emergency management agencies. So this is the different phases of the emergency. So before the emergency occurs, it's preparedness. So that's where we get our community informed about what to do in the event of an emergency. The response, that's what we do during the emergency. The recovery is what happens after the emergency. And then finally, the mitigation, hazard mitigation. Now, in an emergency, we utilize FEMA's prescribed system of managing these emergencies called ICS, or Incident Command System. And this is important for a number of reasons. Primarily, it allows emergency managers from across the country to use the same system and the same terminology in addressing emergencies. In fact, I was speaking to a government official from the Philippines, and he had taken FEMA courses in ICS. And because of that, we were able to have a conversation about emergency management. So that goes to show how effective the ICS system is. When an emergency occurs, the Emergency Operations Center, or the EOC, is activated. And our partners from local, state, and federal governments, NGOs, and private entities are called in. In the EOC, we help coordinate our efforts and resources to address issues and needs during an emergency. We utilize the ICS system with respect to organizational structure of the EOC, and this is how the EOC is structured. Myself being incident commander, and you have a deputy incident commander, and you have the various branch chiefs. You have an operations chief, planning chief, logistics chief, and a finance and administration chief. Now, this is the same structure you will find all across the country and even throughout the world. In some places where you do follow ICS, FEMA's ICS, you will find the same kind of structure. Now, there's only 6 of us in our office, and so of course we need a lot of people. We need people to come together and help us during an emergency. And so during an activation, we actually have about 60 to 80 people in our EOC. And the EOC is smaller than this room. And we have representatives from Maui County, from the state of Hawaii, the federal government, and non-governmental organizations. This is our EOC. The video pans out, but you see there's a whole bunch of people in this room. And this is where we make decisions, we disseminate information about what's going on during an emergency. Also when it comes to resources, like what kind of resources, what kind of needs this community needs during an emergency, we can get that through the EOC. So, with respect to community resilience, it begins with the individual. And so someone once told me that you have to be a participant in your own rescue. And that's very true. And these are the things that you can do to prepare for an emergency. Prepare an emergency kit, be informed of emergencies. The County of Maui has a county alert system called Maka'ala. If you haven't signed up for it, this is a very good service to have. It will let you know, and you can set your preferences either by text, email, voicemail. It'll tell you alerts like from tsunamis to hurricanes to missile attacks. So that's a good system to use, and also make a plan. Okay, so, and then I was asked to talk about a little bit about CERT, and this is the Community Emergency Response Team. And so in our communities, if an emergency occurs, more than likely, if you were to dial 911, police and fire will probably be overwhelmed. And so this is where we train community members to help out with various rescue techniques or things like that. So this is, these are actually volunteers, community volunteers doing this type of work. So, kind of training you. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Herman. We'll move on to our next speakers, and they have some very interesting information. Our next speaker is, and we're so honored to have him join us because he's quite in demand, but he is the professor of the University of Hawaii at Manoa and vice chair of the Honolulu Climate Change Commission. Not only is he a renowned and foremost researcher and speaker here in Hawaii and elsewhere, he's published over 100 peer-reviewed articles as well as 3 textbooks, focusing heavily on understanding the impacts of sea level rise on island shorelines, something critical to Hawaii. So please welcome Dr. Chip Fletcher.
Thank you, everybody. It worked perfectly in practice before we got started. I was asked to give to set the background with regard to climate change. The presentation I wanted to give would walk us through the fact that we are emitting greenhouse gases at rates that are every year rising to new records. This year, the emission of greenhouse gases has set a new record. for 2018. The year is not done yet. In 2017, we saw a 1.5 to 2% rise in greenhouse gas emissions globally. After 2014, 15, and 16, 3 years during which global greenhouse gas emissions had stabilized. For decades leading up to that, we had 1 year after another greenhouse gas emissions increasing. They stabilized in 2014, 15, and 16, and we were all extremely hopeful that we were about to bend the curve and decrease our global greenhouse gas emissions. They are actually ticking up now. So here are emissions from prior to the year 1000. This is taken from ICE core data, and you can see that the major greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. CO2 is especially dangerous because once it's in the atmosphere, as much as 50% of it can stay there for centuries and even over 1,000 years. Our greenhouse gases come from various sectors of human activity, agriculture, commercial and residential energy, manufacturing and industry, the transportation sector, and electricity. So it's in every one of these that we need to make changes in order to decrease our greenhouse gas emissions. And as CO2 has risen, the yellow line from the end of the 19th century, we also see the rise of temperature in red. And global average temperature is now 1 degree C or 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the natural temperature would be. That may not seem like a lot, but if we reach 2 and 3 degrees C, we are approaching 6 degrees Fahrenheit warming. How do you feel when you have a fever of 6 degrees? You feel bad. If it continues for several days, you end up going to the hospital. If you maintain that fever for 2 weeks, you're actually in a life-threatening situation. So it's the core temperature of the atmosphere that matters. The temperature on our skin goes up and down 10, 20 degrees during the day if we're exposed to sunlight and exposed to shadow. It's the core temperature that matters. And the core temperature of our climate system is the air temperature of the atmosphere. So as this rises, we see tremendous changes taking place. We are already experiencing severe impacts from climate change. Wildfire season is almost a third of a year longer, and we are burning 6 times more acres since the 1970s. 1/3 of all humans are exposed to life-threatening heat 20 days per year. And despite all of the hazards that you track, I noticed that heat waves are not in there. The same is the case with the city and county of Honolulu. Every county in Hawaii, and in fact most of the states in the US, are not identifying heat waves as an extreme weather event. And so we are going into a time of heat waves completely unprepared. Rice, wheat, soy, and maize, the 4 staples of our food system globally, have 17% less protein, zinc, vitamin B complex, and iron, because plants grown in a higher CO2 atmosphere put more energy into sugars, into carbohydrates, and less into the nutrients that we need and that we eat our plants for. By 2050, this will lead to an additional 300 million people with malnourishment and an additional 1.4 billion women and children likely to have an iron deficiency. In 10 years, global water needs will exceed the sustainable supply by 40%. And today, almost 1% of all humanity are displaced from their homes. This is largely in North Africa, in the Middle East, and we see it in Central America, and we also see it in Southeast Asia. Basically, the region around the tropics is beginning to experience intense drought, and this leads to food and water shortages, which can lead to violent conflict, which leads to the displacement of people from their homelands. So this is a major problem that we are now beginning to see. I don't know if you saw the news last week, but we are tear gassing asylum seekers on our Mexican border. This used to be the stuff in Greece and Italy as Syrians tried to get into the EU. Now it's happening in North America. Weather disasters have doubled in 2 decades, and extreme rainfall has increased 12% around the world. This is Greenland. The gravity field of Greenland is measured every 10 days by a satellite, and as it changes, it reflects the loss of ice. And here we have, a 15-year record of declining ice on Greenland. Next. This is Antarctica. The entire ice field is in a state of decline. Next. Most of the melting is taking place in West Antarctica, but we are looking at the loss of these two major systems of ice, as well as most of the mountain glaciers of the world. And here is the problem, carbon dioxide. So as I described, we have the rise of carbon dioxide in billions of tons of CO2 per year since the year 2000. We had a temporary plateau, and we ticked up in 2017, and now it looks like we're going to tick up again in 2018. The International Energy Agency last week issued its 2018 outlook. Energy demand is set to grow by over 25% by 2040. More than 70% of energy investments will be government-driven. Renewables have become the technology of choice by the year 2040, and they rise to over 40% of energy generation from today's 25%. But oil consumption grows due to rising demand for petrochemicals, trucking, and aviation, and hence CO2 emissions continue to increase all the way to mid-century. So what's happening is China and India want to enter the middle class. They are demanding more energy, and that demand for new energy is not being met rapidly enough by the deployment of renewables. Instead, they are relying on our traditional fossil fuel network. And this came out yesterday. It turns out that to stop warming at 2 degrees C, the world must triple its efforts at cutting greenhouse gas emissions. To stop at 1.5 degrees C, it must quintuple its efforts at decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. If we want to stop at 1.5 degrees C, this is the year 2020, we have to bend the curve, but instead it looks like the projections are going this way for carbon dioxide emissions. And even if we were, every single scenario requires negative emissions. Negative emissions are where we pull CO2 out of the air. So it's not enough to just cut. We need to actually remove CO2. And there is what's known as the global carbon law. If we cut our emissions by 50% per decade, and then the following decade, another 50, and another 50 the following decade, by mid-century we will be essentially decarbonized. And the great thing about this law is that it scales up from every single person in this room. If you cut your carbon footprint by 50% in the next 10 years, your family, your community, the island, the state, the nation, all of this adds up. If the global community can do this, then we have a chance at stopping this warming. And that's why every single person, every single household must be a player in this. None of us can afford to duck out because, quote, we don't matter. Unfortunately, there is this terrible, beautiful linear relationship between world GDP and atmospheric carbon dioxide. And that relationship is what's going to be driving us into the future. Price Waterhouse consultants and a whole lot of other global economists are predicting continuing rise in GDP, these folks, by 130% by mid-century. We have to break that relationship. And so these are all the different computer model scenarios. Next. They all basically predict we're going to hit 1.5 degrees C by 2030 to 2040. 2 degrees C is much more uncertain. But the pathway we are on leads us to right here, and so we're looking at 2 degrees C by mid-century. And here again, same sort of thing. It's a ugly, but again, very beautiful diagram. These are different climate scenarios. This is going into the future to the end of the century. We are currently located right here with our carbon dioxide emissions. Next. And we are on a pathway that's going to take us to about 3 to 4 degrees C by the end of the century. And I think the next one is the movie, and I will end with that.
Estaba viendo, impresionante, la crecida del río, pues, in a new abnormal. Things like this will be part of our future.
So this is from the UN GAP report. This came out yesterday. And it is their analysis of the gap between where we need to be and where we are in terms of stopping warming at either 1.5 or 2 degrees C. And I'll end with that. Thank you. We'll take questions at the end.
Our next speaker is our System Operations Director from Maui Electric with a very challenging position. How do you keep everything operating, even as we make the transition towards more renewables? So please join me in welcoming, and if you haven't, you've got their bios in the back of the program this evening, so I'll save you from my reading them. But please welcome our System Operations Director from Maui Electric, my colleague, Chris Reynolds.
Welcome and thank you for coming out tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about today's electrical grid. So basically, Maui Electric Company has a service area covering Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. There's some figures down below, a little more than 11,000 or 1,100 square miles, and about a little more than 71,000 customers last year. Something unique to our system is from other utilities, especially on the mainland, we have no interconnection to any other electric utility. We have no interconnection amongst our own islands. So what customers need on that island, we have to generate when they need it. And small isolated grids do present operational challenges. They're very dynamic, and they can be, there's issues with power quality and delivery of electricity on a reliable and resilient basis. So Maui Electric Grid, we have basically for Maui Electric owned, we have basically 3 generating sites for Maui, and that's it. There's the Kaului Power Plant up in the harbor, Ma'alaia Power Plant, and then we have a small generating units out there in Hana. So with that, we started bringing on more and more renewable energy, and that plays a key role in our resiliency. Because then you can look at renewable resources on Maui, and you can look at all the sites we have. You can see them basically spread across from West Maui down over to South Maui. That kind of spreading gives us this geographic diversity that allows us to maintain the flow of electricity. And if a natural disaster hits, say like in West Maui, people in South Maui are not really affected by it that much. So, and another part of the diversity is actually these small PV systems on people's homes. So right now we have over 100 megawatts of distributed solar across the island, and you can see by the counts and the areas of how much are actually installed over there. So basically, what's considered for resilient energy planning, basically we want it to be reliable. We want to keep the lights on. It has to be economical, because no sense in making electricity but no one could afford to use it. It's going to be clean. And it's got to be smart. We can't be installing a lot of equipment now and then crowding out future developments. So with that, we do have a goal of attaining 100% renewable portfolio standard goal. Our near-term plan is we're going to do some grid-scale renewable energy projects more. We're looking at system security projects, along with more customer distributed generation, and actually looking at customer demand response. So actually when there's a little shortage on electricity, we can actually ask customers to actually turn things off, and we actually reimburse them for that. Our long-term view is we're actually going to be retiring the Kaului Power Plant and replacing it with renewable energy generation. We're continuing to add distributed generation, and we're looking at energy storage with renewable energy sources. To kind of help us get there, we have actually formalized a plan. It's an integrated grid planning. This is out on our website, or the Hawaiian Electric website. Basically, it's a comprehensive plan. It involves customer and stakeholders' input, and it's really about moving Maui towards a reliable, resilient, clean energy future. So storms. The one thing about being resilient is being able to respond to things you really have very little control over. So, if you remember a few years ago, we had 2 hurricanes back to back coming on, and if you can see that, that's tiny little dot over on the one side, that's Maui. So when Iselle hit the Big Island, there was a huge impact to them. They lost a lot of trees, they lost electricity for a long periods of time. We've had other storms impact Maui. We've had the 2015 storm on Valentine's Day, and just this year we've had a huge wildfire over West Maui when Hurricane Lane passed by the islands. We're going to talk about power restoration. While we can't avoid storms, we can react to them and respond appropriately to get customers' service back as soon as we can. Part of it is being situational awareness, monitoring the conditions, and activating the right resources to bring this power back. The good thing for us is hurricanes rarely sneak up on us, so we get plenty of notice. And we'd like to thank PDC for all the information and help they give us, along with the county emergency management. So when a disaster hits and we have large outages, it's not just a few linemen that go out in the field. Everybody's activated at Maui Electric. And there's groups of people that you'll never see out on the road, but they're coming into work and they're responding. At the top of the list is safety. They're the guys that are helping us guarantee that everyone is safe. Not only our workers, but the community as well. We have mapping people, land management, we have warehouse getting supplies out to people, communications, customer services, answering the phones, when customers are saying, where's my power? Engineers and planners actually designing alternate routes and how to get power back to people. We have community relations, people reaching out there and assuring the community and giving news releases. We have government relations, so we can let county and state officials know what we're doing. And finally, it's the finance people who just have to write a check for the whole thing. So like I said, it's safety first. There's a lot of dangerous conditions out there. It's kind of nice that you see them cutting the tree when it's nice and sunny out, but more than likely it's dark and rainy. We do damage assessment to know where to send people and how quickly we need to get them there. We cover a lot of mountainous areas, and so we use any kind of resources we can. So helicopters, vehicles, even customers calling in and letting us know. And part of our restoration is we bring up transmissions and substations first. Those are the backbones of our system. And without that, we can't really deliver power down into the neighborhoods and down to the individual businesses. With that, we start repairing the distribution circuits that come into your neighborhoods, restoring overhead lines, underground cables, and then finally we come back and do the little ones. This house tree came down, knocked their service down, pick up these small groups of people. And then finally when we bring back everybody, we brought them back any way we could. We're routing power all the way around the island. Then we come back and then we put our system back to normal. That means setting poles, putting new conductors, clearing trees. An example would be for the Hurricane Lane. We have 3 lines going over to West Maui. Hurricane Lane took out 2 of those. So we had everything riding on one line. So that's what we did, is we basically got everybody back to Lahaina, we picked up everybody. Then for the next 2 weeks, we focused on getting those 2 lines back in service. One of the things we also focus on is critical infrastructure here. We have the hospital, the police station, the Kaului Airport, the harbor, county water systems, county wastewater systems. These are all critical infrastructures that we need to maintain so we can ensure public safety. We're also not alone. Even though we're on an island, we actually help each other. This is an example when Iselle hit the Big Island. We finished repairs on our island and we packed up a bunch of our linemen, we packed up our trucks, and we deployed them over to the Big Island where they were able to help restore. And as was mentioned earlier, we're part of the Mutual Assistance Group, Western Regional Mutual Assistance Group. So this is a picture of Hawaiian Electric Light and Maui Electric employees getting ready to board a plane to head over to California to assist with the power restoration. We kind of, as part of this resiliency thing, we want people to be prepared. There's no sense in waiting to the last minute. We do put out a little brochure. It's on our website. It's in the back over here that will help you read through, find out what you need, what you can do to help basically mitigate and ride through some of these disturbances. And with that, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Up next is County of Maui's Energy Commissioner, an appointee of the Arakawa administration. He came to us 4 years ago, and I have to tell you a funny story about him because his first day on the job was a Molokai. He was dispatched over to participate in an event there. He walked in with shoes into the building, and he quickly learned Hawaii. And so we've been so pleased to have him as part of our family and energy work here in our county, and I think you'll enjoy the information he has sharing about county facilities and the innovative solutions available as well. Commissioner Fred Riddell.
I might take off my shoes for this. So, well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate everybody's time and to listen to these things, and I think everybody that's before me has so much great things to say, and I'm really just going to come behind there and say, what is the county actually doing? What are we trying to achieve? What have we tried to achieve over the last 4 years? Where have we made improvements? And then I think I want to just take a moment, though, to say thank you to everybody for the opportunity that I've had for the last 4 years to be a part of the community. And thanks to Lance Holter, who's in the audience, who convinced me that I should come out here and see what I could do to help, because I tried for years to build a solar power project here starting in 2006 or so, and was unsuccessful fully, but now others will do it. So let's get forward here. So what the county is doing first, we did enter into over many years, and before I came on board, just a few of these kilowatt hours are something that I brought on, but is to increase our renewable energy use. The important part here, from a county standpoint, is we want to be participative in this adventure to get forward on renewable energy. How reduce our demand on fuels coming in. So we have about we have a number of facilities, 24 facilities with about 2.3 megawatts. It's only a small fraction of what you just saw. 100 megawatts, of course, of distributed energy that's on the grid. And we have some wind energy too. So another area that we found, though, important over this time, and I think I'm hoping that it goes forward into the next administration, and I think we have a few people here from the council, that they support the ideas of getting to be more energy efficient. Why does this matter? If you have to bring in less fuel, you can manage your problems better. Now, from an order of magnitude concept, what we did in one of the looks at energy efficiency was to look at the War Memorial facility. It has many meters, many different uses. We found that it spends about $300,000 a year just for that facility alone for energy. Anybody have a guess on how much we could actually reduce if we did all of the energy efficiency measures in that facility? Just a wild guess, anybody? About half. We could actually reduce the energy of that facility alone by half if we move forward with all the energy efficiency measures. What we have to do that is make an investment. Right? Does that investment pay itself back? We looked at that and we found many of these things, at least about 60% of them, made a lot of good sense with a payback period of less than 5 years. So in other departments, they're taking this, looking at this and saying, how are we going to do this? I know the police departments are now looking at how to be more energy efficient. You don't have to just first install renewable energy to be resilient, use less and you'll be more resilient. Then, and this one I think I'm going to talk a lot about. It's more than just this community-based renewable energy concept. But when I plotted out here were all of these places that, with the exception of where I plotted out the landfill, where people retreat to in an emergency. These are where most of the community centers are. I think I'm missing the community center in Kihei, but or the gymnasium on Lanai. The idea here is these facilities are an opportunity to be more resilient. During these last hurricanes, there was the need for people to seek shelter. Those facilities, when we started looking at them, they're not necessarily designed, they were designed under an idea of the past. That idea in the past was, I just need the shelter. I need to have that coverage, and I need a short period of time, I need to deal with that. People might be there for longer periods of time now. We need to start looking at whether or not these facilities need emergency power, need backup power, need renewable energy. How can you do that cost effectively? Well, maybe you could do it through a community-based renewable energy program, because these facilities don't actually need a lot of energy during the day, and it never made sense to put renewable energy on it. But now what we're looking at is there a different model to use? Is there a way that you could use this facility in a way that benefits the community, but when there's an emergency, find a way to island that, be energy resilient at the facility without having to truck in fuel, without having to be part of that distribution network for fuel during the times when you have an emergency. Which brings up my main point on this is, as the utility was just mentioning, they are the backbone of what the county does with water, with wastewater, with all of these things. We need the utility to be able to operate efficiently. At the same time, though, the county actually has all of this backup power. Every single one of the critical facilities has emergency generators. Though they have to deal with a fuel network. That's a very important thing. So the county has developed an extensive way to look at which facilities, in working with the Emergency Management Agency, which facilities have generators, how much fuel do they need, when do they need it, how do they get it there in every emergency, and then of course working again with the utility to find those ways to restore the grid. However, this is the point, that resource you all paid for. Paying for that resource once over in one pillar with the utility, for me, didn't make a whole lot of sense to just let it sit in this pillar and be isolated and not valuable in other instances. So, and this funny chart makes good sense to all sorts of utility people. It's about this thing called the duck curve. But the story of it is that the peaks, and what the utility was just mentioning, you have to be able to have a generator available. We said, well, we should start to work with the utility to find those opportunities where the asset that everybody has purchased, and instead of purchasing it again, bridge that, or put those two pillars a little bit together and have a benefit. That benefit comes out, and we were able to contract with the utility 3.1 megawatts of a 5 megawatt program with existing assets, not having to pay for them again with the utility, and then being able to lower the bills with the county, having this win-win situation. If you got together and started to look for solutions, you have good assets on the island that make sense to use. So instead of having this problem where you have to get up the ramp, but you fall on your ducky bottom, you can actually use what you already have and flatten it out. And with that, I'm shortening up the time.
Our final guest speaker before we go to Q&A, and again, if you have a question, those half-sheet cards or half cards, please jot them down. If you need another, just wave your hand and someone will get that to you, because then we'll open up for Q&A session, our question and answer. But our final speaker here at the podium is the founder and lead researcher of, and I really like that name, HyperCom, but High Performance Energy Resilient Communities. One of my most favorite mix of words. So please join me. You met him a little earlier, but he is Alex DeRode. I always say DeRode, so I get scoldings, but Alex.
Thank you, Mahina. Yeah, so the road, like you're driving down the road. Okay, so we mentioned the word hypercom a few times here, and I wanted to give you a little more insight into what the heck is that thing. Hypercom was originally created, formed as part of a doctoral research program. And this is a PhD program that I'm pursuing with a university called the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, based in Stockholm. There is a head of a division there named Ivo Martinac, who used to serve on our Sustainable Living Institute of Maui at UH Maui College on the steering committee. And through him, I was able to connect and say, hey, why don't we bring your expertise from Sweden in energy systems and renewable energy and district energy systems and do some research here on Maui and try to advance our understanding and level of knowledge of, and solutions that we can use to address resiliency concerns here on the island. So hence was created the High Performance and Energy Resilient Communities research project and its adjoining working group. And I'll give you a little more detail about our adventures so far. So the partnership for the doctoral research team is a partnership between Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, or KTH, University of Hawaii Maui College, and Pacific Disaster Center, PDC. The doctoral research team has me involved as the lead researcher. Ivo Martinac, who I just mentioned, is the primary academic advisor. We have another co-advisor named Genku Kayo, who has expertise in community-scale energy systems and energy microgrids, who's also affiliated with KTH in Sweden. Carlos Velasquez, who you heard earlier this evening, is involved as our disaster sciences advisor. And Stuart Zinner, who's here in the audience, hey Stuart, who is our energy advisor, former energy coordinator at UH Maui College. So this forms our research team, and it's going to be about a 3 to 4 year research endeavor here to bring this, at least for the doctoral part of this effort, to be bring that to closure. But the activities, we hope, will go well beyond just the research component. Hence the launching of the Maui Hypercom Working Group. We launched this meeting back in July of this year, not 2108, but 2018, at UH Maui College. Yeah, future planning. The themes we discussed, we had expertise from PDC, from KTH. Some of the information you saw today was also covered at this initial launch meeting, just to kind of bring everybody on the same page. What is the terminology we're using about resiliency so that we understand what each other's saying, right, when we're having these discussions. And then we launched into some more focused conversations on how do we integrate the priorities of all sectors of society when we're thinking of energy resiliency, right? What's the perspective of the private sector, the public sector, civil society? How do you bring all those together to work as a team? What are some opportunities and synergies and alignment with existing community-based plans and programs? Right, so you saw MEMA, that's already in place. Maui Electric has their processes in place. We have our Maui Island Plan, General Plan, Community Plans. How do all these come together in an integrated way to address something like energy resiliency? And third theme we covered was, what are some best practices and lessons learned from past events? Right, so how can we look at what's happened in other communities and even in our own communities in the past and learn from their mistakes, but also their solutions, right? So looking at examples like Hurricane Maria's impacts in Puerto Rico, Hurricane Iniki, 2018 Kauai flood are some examples. So what we've done so far, here's just, I'm going to show you some images of some of the activities that the working group's been involved in to date. We had a presentation by Doug Bosch with the Science Advisor for Pacific Disaster Center presenting to us about this HAZUS program, which is a hazard mitigation analysis tool, vulnerability assessment tool. That's going to be part of the research where we're able to put in data into this model and help us assess the vulnerabilities of our infrastructure. with regards to energy. We had Ivo Martinak from KTH talking to us about resilient and sustainable energy communities, some case studies from Sweden. Here's our working group, all ears taking careful notes. And here are some of the current members of Hypercom. And this is really an open door type of process. We want people who want to be involved to feel like they're welcome to be part of this effort. So, so far we have Maui Electric, MEDB, County of Maui, Maui Electric Company, Hydro Agency Maui Resort and Spa, all coming with their various perspectives, right? We talk about private sector, public sector, civil society, and helping to inform the research that we're involved in. Oh, I should mention, and Kuhea, who's been a great champion of our efforts here, just coined the Hypercom Challenge, which is that for any group interested in taking some type of leadership role in this effort to step up, we welcome that. Miko has done a tremendous effort in this regard, helping us with field trips, which I'll share with you here in a second, helping us organize this community forum. MEDB has also stepped up with some efforts on helping us with a county fair survey that we implemented. I'll share a little bit about that with you. So having all these partners come together and really kind of take their own initiatives within this larger effort. Draft mission statement. I say draft because we haven't brought this before the working group yet to really get integrated or comprehensive input. But right now the draft mission statement for Maui Hypercom is we want to serve as a convener and think tank to further Maui's energy resilience by elevating island resiliency as a core consideration and integrated key driver in all community decision making. So not have resiliency as an afterthought or just something we kind of think about or throw some resources at, but really how do we make that a key driver of our decision making? And the draft mission statement, Maui Island is 100% energy self-sufficient and serves as a model of energy resilience for other islands and remote communities. Right? So we're a remote island here in the Pacific, but we have other communities in Alaska, for example, who are not islands, but are facing equal constraints of being a remote community. And when you see Maui Hypercom here, we're focusing on Maui Island for the research, because if we went statewide right away, it's just too much to bite off. But once we create a model that we think works here, hopefully we could have a Kauai Hypercom, or Molokai Hypercom, or Big Island Hypercom. So here's some of the activities we've been involved in. We did a tour of the Maui Electric Company Ma'alaya Power Plant. It was fun, interesting, and informative. Carlos brought that up about its location, and that's certainly a concern, but also very informative to learn some of the measures that MECO is considering to help address the concerns of, for example, tsunami impacts. So we got to tour the ins and outs of the power plant. A lot of us had never been there, and it was really eye-opening to be able to kind of see all the different types of systems, technologies from brand new technologies to legacy systems that are in the process of being replaced. Yeah, and we had a nice view here. We have the Ma'alaya power plant, and right behind it we have the Oahe wind farm. Kind of hard to see here, but we got to see some of that renewable energy generation that feeds into the Ma'alaya power plant. Field trips are always fun. So part of this effort, is also building community. It helps us to nurture these relationships, and we have memories and knowledge that we share. So we hope to have more opportunities like this in the future. Okay, so moving on to one of our more recent activities, the Maui County Fair Energy Resilience Survey. This was an effort where we developed a survey for the public to take at the county fair, which MEDB does every year. And they stepped up and offered, hey, this year let's do it on energy resilience. So we had draft questions that were developed by the research team, got sent out to the working group, and we got all kinds of feedback, very useful feedback from the working group. Unfortunately, because at the county fair, people have a somewhat short attention span and a lot to see and do, we could only ask about 4 or 5 questions, even though we started with a list of maybe 20. That was a good start. We got those 4 or 5 questions which were informative, and I'll share some of those results with you. So we had exactly 1,111 participants. The first question was, how do you feel about the preparedness of our community to cope with extended multi-day power outages? And we see here that about 37% feel that we're somewhat prepared as a community to deal with such outages, 33% adequately, 17% are very optimistic that we're very well prepared, and not at all prepared, about 8%. Second question was, how do you feel that you're prepared as a household, individual household, to cope with extended multi-day power outages? And here we had extremely well prepared, about 10%, adequately prepared, 36%, somewhat prepared, 23%. So you can kind of gauge where people are in that. When there is a emergency event such as a natural disaster, hurricane, tsunami, earthquake, what's your primary source of information? Social media, what do we have there? Radio and television is our top 2. So if you can access those during those events, right, that's one of their primary sources. Then we have contact with family, so more of the immediate neighborhood and community, getting word of mouth. County website is also a resource that folks go to, and then a few others here. And are you aware of any existing programs and community efforts focused on increasing Maui Island's energy resilience in the face of natural disasters such as hurricanes, tsunamis, and earthquakes? Resounding no, for the most part. All right. So that's where the community outreach and engagement component is so critical. Right? And that's part of what we want to do with HyperCom, is to get this out to the public more, get the conversation more in people's households and community groups, the county council, in the private sector. And this is just a little background information on the respondents, where they're from. And what do? We see a lot of them are teachers, they're self-employed, managers, administrators, a few farmers in there. So some of the next steps here with HyperCom. We want to continue to engage with the Maui community at large. We're going to be continuing to convene the HyperCom working group, continuing the research efforts, hopefully continuing more of the educational opportunities like visiting the Maalaea Power Plant. Help to inform vulnerability assessments of some of the work that PDC and Carlos, that Carlos mentioned. How do we help inform the vulnerability assessments and risk analyses of Maui Island's energy infrastructure? We want to contribute to Maui Island hazard mitigation planning efforts. MEMA is involved in those efforts, and Herman just mentioned earlier to me that they're going to be updating the hazard mitigation plan for Maui County shortly. There's going to be a process that's going to begin. So hopefully our efforts can help inform that process. And assist in the development of best practices for optimizing Maui's energy resilience. The focus of the research is primarily looking at it from impacts of natural disasters. We're not as focused on cybersecurity or missile attacks, but we're really trying to hone in on how do we address potential impacts of natural disasters on our energy infrastructure. Thank you for your time.
Okay, this one is it's a starter question. It goes to, plenty of questions, okay. For Dr. Fletcher, this is starting for you. The question is, do we have microphones there? Here. Okay, there you go. What are ways to cut down on CO2 and reduce our carbon footprint? We'll start with you.
So the most effective way to reduce our personal carbon footprints is to have smaller families. Like by several orders of magnitude over things like eating a more vegetable-based diet, flying less, which a personal rule I broke by coming over here. I haven't been to the mainland in a couple of years. I used to go several times a year. Multi-generational households. I've got my 3 children, a son-in-law, 2 grandkids, and occasional boyfriends and girlfriends. So sometimes we have 10 people living in our house. We have just put solar panels on our house, and the loan we got from Hawaii State Federal Credit Union is interest-free for 2 years. And the interest we pay every month is only a little bit more than the electrical bill we used to pay. And at the end of 2 years, I'll own those panels. And it won't have been any skin off my back. It would have been just the same as paying my electric bill. Next thing I'm going to do is buy batteries. And that way I can charge my car at night from sunlight that my batteries collected during the day. Decarbonize your diet. So eat local food as much as possible. Look at everything you buy and ask where did it come from. And if it came from Maui, you have permission to buy it. If it didn't, think twice. And then the last 2 things, I think, are vote, climate change, environmental preservation, ecosystem restoration and conservation. I didn't get a chance to go into the terrible things that are happening to our ecosystems globally and locally, but they're just horrible things. And then talk to people. Spread the word. Climate change is real. It's going to affect everything in our lives. So pass the word around. And I'm advising my students. We're now doing exercises in class on how to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience. It worked for the Vietnam War, and it can work for climate change. Even though we're in a state where everybody agrees that climate change is a big problem and all the politicians are on board, they are not moving with the urgency we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. Next question is from Maui Electric and the county. It's a 2-part. 1, what are the 3 biggest users of electricity on Maui? How much electricity does the Department of Water Supply use to pump water? How much energy to treat wastewater? First one is, what are the 3 biggest users of electricity on Maui? Chris and Sharon are going to jump in quote. Or both of you can answer. We should have studied
I'll
together.
go first, and if not, we have our commercial account managers in the back that can correct me. County of Maui, it has their combined facilities across the counties is our largest customer.
Okay.
State of Hawaii airports, I believe.
Maybe you can put the hotels as a group.
Yeah, the resorts as a group.
So
Mr. Brent?
from the county's perspective, well, that's a really good question. So when I started doing this job, I had no idea, how much we were using. So I've been working on an energy tracking system. We finally got the first iteration of that done, where we're actually able to import data from the utility and then actually see what is the county using and how much energy is the county using. And I believe, but don't quote me today, I think our electric bill is in total over $20 million. And the biggest users, of course, the biggest chunk of that, say 30% or more of that, was water pumping, and another big chunk of that was wastewater disposal. Now, it's hard to manage those, and some of them are very energy intensive, and we've been going through ways to reduce that energy use. But a lot of it, of course, also comes down to planning. How will you change things into the future? What facilities can you move? How are you going to zone where people are? And those are ways we maybe be able to reduce in the future.
And I can share that in the past, we have worked with the county to make sure that they took advantage of rebates for energy efficient technologies. I believe that they have variable frequency drives on their motors, so it's not just running full speed all the time, as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been finding innovative ways now, like I was mentioning with demand response, how do we use some of our assets, but what Sharon's mentioning, more efficient operations, especially the blowers and other things at the wastewater treatment plants, going into ways that we can actually reduce the energy use that we're doing that. And then I looked at other fun ideas, because I was like, wow, we heat the pools in Maui, that's kind of neat, right? It's a tropical place, but we do, and how much energy do we use at any time to heat our pools? Well, 5 megawatts peak. I'm like, wow, that's a lot. So, we're trying to find other ways to be more efficient, and I think it's really, about, looking for those opportunities and collaborating with the utility to find those.
And you magically answered the other question, which is what efficiency strategies can be used to reduce energy use and boost resiliency? Is there anything else you want to add to that, Fred?
Like, as I was mentioning, I think the biggest thing is the reduced use. Of course, it has the direct benefit of reducing your carbon footprint. But the other one, of course, for being resilient is the less you rely on something, especially external to the island, the more the better off you're going to be. So those are, I think, the biggest strategy. Hopefully, the next administration continues looking at is just being more efficient.
Our next question is, with Maui infrastructure, electric plants, waste treatment plants, etc., built in flood zones and vulnerable to catastrophic tsunamis, how will government and utilities financially plan for mitigation? Can we plan with the federal government to fund percentage of the support, and how much will come from the citizens and taxpayers? We both have county and
Just kidding.
Maui
I can
emergency
try
management.
if you want. So I think that's a very complex problem. It's not something that, in my personal opinion, I think is done immediately. The experts on this is the Department of Environmental Management. But I think is what's being shown by Chip's slides and by the rest of the slides, Carlos, especially Carlos's slides. The original idea of how things were built, was under a different idea. Then the entire infrastructure and every single thing points in that direction. Every sewer, every pumping station, everything on the island pumps or looks at or directs things to these facilities. So I know what the Department of Environmental Management has been doing is looking at how do you transition out of that. Same way I think that the utility is looking for the Maalaea power plant in their future generation. How do you change over time? It's very hard to say we're just going to wipe that off the earth today and then rebuild the entire thing. That would be wonderful. I don't think that's a realistic option. I think it's that you have to have the right planning, you need to do the right steps, and then over time you're going to fix or change the idea that you started with, which was what Carlos was showing, a different idea.
Herman, did you want to add anything?
I wanted to add that in previous drawings of the tsunami inundation zone, Maalaea was not completely in the zone. However, when it was updated recently, both of our power plants were in the zone, and we already have a commitment to retire Kahului Power Plant in the 2022 timeframe. It helps us to meet certain environmental requirements. For Maalaea, when we learned that both facilities were in the zone, we did look at mitigation measures, and one option was to build a wall, but a wall was going to be about $50 million, and it doesn't guarantee anything. So, knock on wood, we're living with the risk, but the mitigation plan is to make sure that new facilities or a new generation is not in the zone, right? So that's our way of mitigating that, and through our competitive solicitation process, you'll see that projects that are being proposed are not in those areas.
Herman, did you want to add?
Just quickly, I know the county, it's been discussed for some time now about moving the wastewater plant from the Kahului over to someplace else that's not in a flood inundation zone. It's a very costly endeavor, and so that's the reason why it's taking some time. But I know that's something that the current mayor anyway has been talking about for some time. With respect to funding, federal funding, there is funding out there, but it's very limited, especially with everything that's going on right now throughout the country. It's been very difficult getting funding, especially something that big, something that where we could move an entire facility into another area. So.
Thank you. This question seems like it's for Chris Reynolds from my electric side. What effect would requiring all businesses and homes to install solar electric? What effect would that have?
The positive effect would boost the integration of renewable energy on the island of Maui, throughout Maui County as well. There would probably be some logistical aspects of it that the utility would have to do on the back end to ensure power quality and some other probable infrastructure upgrades. But it's not undoable.
This one says for Chris Reynolds, so you must have just hang on to that. Given the trends in technology, in your opinion, how realistic is a 100% 2045 renewable energy goal for Maui County? Could it be accelerated given current levels of support from the community? I'm going to say that Sharon could also chime in.
The 2045 goal of 100% in the renewable portfolio stand is very achievable. I don't have any doubt. What kind of is waiting us in the future is what technology is going to be available to make it, one, more resilient and less costly for everyone. Right now, there's lots of issues where people say, well, you can just install batteries. Batteries are expensive. They use heavy metals. You don't know the life cycle of them. What are you going to do with the disposal of it? So we're hoping as time progresses, things become more efficient. We've seen the LED light bulbs take hold, a huge savings energy, along with a lot of other types of equipment that people use. So it's hard to say what the future holds, but I think we're making incredible strides to getting 100% renewable, and very possible to get it sooner than 2045.
Right. There are a few questions here about burying or going to underground power lines. So this is for my electric. And one simply says can be buried power lines. The other is more specific about seeing underground lines on Manu Avenue go underground. Can we expect to see other power line eyesores to be replaced with underground lines? Another one also talks about what can we do to go underground. So Chris and Sharon, is it possible to bring our power lines underground, and to what effect does that have? What would make it possible, or what gets in the way?
So basically, a lot of the new lines that are going in for subdivisions, developments are going underground. Developments are going in, they're putting it in. One of the aspects of undergrounding existing facilities is expense. It's very expensive. A lot of our easements, permits where we have line are specifically for overhead lines. We have to almost renegotiate for an easement to start burying these. And then it's just a matter of the limited capital budgets we have. So are we going to focus on undergrounding all our facilities? Are we going to focus on getting more renewable energy in place? There's quite a few things that kind of have to happen along the way.
Sharon, did you want to?
Yes, I think when we looked at doing a transmission line to South Maui in the past, it was about 3 times the cost to go underground. And I think, Chris, maybe you can help educate the audience here, but people think that, well, it's more resilient because, from wind, of course, but I think that sometimes when the ground gets saturated, we can see that there impacts on our underground cable also. So, and then detecting exactly where the outage is in the event of an outage takes a little longer. So the time that the customer is impacted without electricity is sometimes longer. So there's pros and cons to different options.
One other thing I will add to that, just aside from that, is that another concern that has come up in the exploration and consideration of underground lines is exposure to EV. As we get through central Maui or any sand plains or any sensitive areas, digging underground in order to enable miles and miles of underground cable exposes us to the possibilities of Hawaiian burials. And so that's been something we've been trying to be sensitive to as well. This next question is for Carlos. It says, what critical infrastructure is not prepared for threats? And how should we start improving those?
Well, that's what we are trying to understand through this study. You know, there are many elements of a system that are critical, and the failure of any of them can damage or affect the functionality of the entire system. So it's not only one; there are several of them, and that's a comprehensive study will help us understand the level of priorities, the level of a kind of a ranking of importance, and how they be addressed, these their vulnerabilities to enhance the resilience of the system. And this, that's the importance of this type of studies. In many cases, we call this pricing the risk, putting a number to the risk that will help us to make decisions on, how we invest, giving our resources, how we allocate those resources. It's impossible to solve all the problems in a system or in a community or in whatever type of study we do. So we need to understand the different priorities, the different levels of importance, and develop a plan that is based on full understanding. This has been a problem all over the world. Many people respond to just pressure from the community, political pressure, trying to let's do this action, or let's invest some money here. And many times that is not what is the most effective or most efficient. And a full understanding of the problem, a comprehensive analysis of all the different options, cost-benefit analysis will help make the right decisions. And that is what we are trying to support here.
Thank you, Carlos. This might be a question that Alice can help us with, and Herman as well. It says, once you identify the hazards, then what? Is there an impact to zoning, including reducing permitting in vulnerable areas? Is that something up for consideration?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say everything's up for consideration. And then, like Carlos was mentioning, trying to optimize and make the best decision with the information we have. So certainly zoning regulations, building code, energy code, making sure that we're at the minimum. When we say set what the building code is, we're saying what would be illegal if we didn't meet these minimum standards, right? If you're not building the code, you're building an illegal structure. So we can set the code higher and higher. We can adjust zoning regulations to minimize risk once we've assessed what the vulnerabilities are and what the risks are. I think the starting point is that vulnerability assessment. That's going to help inform decision makers, inform politicians, business owners, homeowners, etc., as to what the best decisions would be.
Thank you, Alex. Herman, did you want to add anything?
Whenever we have plans for developments that come to our office, it comes in for comment, and we do comment whenever, like, say for instance, if the development is in a flood inundation zone, or say for instance, if we recommend that there needs to be a siren put in. Those are some of the comments that we'll suggest, and hopefully the developer will take heed and make some of those adjustments to their plans.
Thank you. This question I'm not sure, but so whoever can answer it. Will it ever be possible to use car and backup batteries as an emergency source for the grid? Again, our operation people and our engineers. Yes.
I can talk about quickly, and you probably elaborate better. We did have a program here that did look at electric vehicles and how they could be integrated to the grid, and that was a Jump Smart Maui program, which brought on most of the Nissan Leafs you see out in the community, DC fast charging, and then a number of home units. And those were available to the utility then through that program and through new technology for the utility to actually use that as a resource. That was the purpose of the demonstration project, actually. Maybe Chris can tell you more.
In partnership with Hitachi, we were able to test the ability to hook a car up to a house and feed back in. It requires an inverter that can go back and forth. Most of the inverters sold today or chargers sold today actually are just meant to transfer power from the household to the car. So we got to get a different type of charger that allows that two-way energy flow.
Thank you. Dr. Fletcher, this question is for you. What stood out to you about the recent federal report on climate change, and what do we need to start addressing now?
I thought it was amusing that the Trump administration tried to bury it on the biggest shopping day of the year, but it ended up actually drawing more attention to it. So that stood out. It's also the most comprehensive assessment of climate change impacts in the U.S. Ever. So it's a great encyclopedic resource for all things climate change. It's got a lot of technical information. One thing that I tried to write in the coastal chapter of the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands was that our atoll friends are facing an existential crisis, probably by mid-century, but that got edited out. They wanted instead words like that they were facing severe challenges and things like that. So one thing that still exists out there is an underappreciation of the urgency and sort of poor messaging. The messaging that we really need to start decreasing our carbon emissions by 2030 is so wrong. It tells you that, oh, you've got a decade before you really have to start worrying about it. And the message really is we have to have a 50% decrease by 2030. But it's encyclopedic. It's got a great website. Boy, you can find things fast. And it's there for anybody to use to bring to bear on whatever projects you're interested in moving forward on.
Thank you. I'm not sure who this can help with this on the innovative side. Many places across the country have switched to electric mowers, weed eaters, leaf blowers, and chainsaws, with savings to mechanics, fuel, oil changes. They have saved money. Hawaii is the ideal location for this technology. Can we see Maui embracing it soon? I see Fred nodding his head.
Well, sure. I love technology, so I think what really is making those things work, which makes your cell phone work, which makes just about everything, all these things possible, is advancement in batteries. And that reduction, the cost of that, the longer performance. I used to have this, let's say, perfect irritation with my cell phone that the second time I charged it, I was completely disappointed, right? It's like, oh my gosh, now it won't last for one day, Turn off Facebook, it lasts a lot longer. Delete that, and you're going to be perfect. But it's really batteries. That's the thing driving behind it. I'm sure people will get behind that. It makes perfect sense. No need to have to pull to start your mower.
Alex?
Just a quick addition to that. The impact that landscaping equipment has on human health, whether it's noise pollution, breathing in fumes, gasoline or diesel or oil spilling and contaminating the environment is tremendous. So moving to those technologies is certainly a step in the right direction. We still face the issue of what's the embodied energy in a battery and how do we dispose of it or recycle it adequately. But I'll just mention our own experience. My wife and I have a farm up in Kula, and we intentionally did purchase electric-powered equipment and have found limitations to it as well. So depending on whether you have a small, front yard with some nice level grass, it can work well there. In a more challenging agricultural setting, you need some, and the industry is starting to meet those needs as well. But it's, there's definitely a curve there before the technology can meet the need. We're getting there.
Thank you. This is for Dr. Fletcher. Is it really as simple as cutting CO2? What about methane and nitrous dioxide?
Those have shorter atmospheric lifetimes. They're extremely powerful. They're much more effective at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. And they need to be cut as well. But if you put your efforts into cutting these shorter-lived greenhouse gases, and in so doing take efforts away from cutting carbon dioxide, you're gaining short-term advantages, but you're not solving the problem for future generations. We really need to focus on carbon dioxide because it just lingers as a poison there in the atmosphere for such a long time, trapping heat.
Can I do a follow-up question?
Sure.
So why do we focus on renewable energy? Why aren't we focusing on carbon explicitly?
Because we're trying to get off the fossil fuel cycle. Renewable energy uses non-carbon sources. And so basically getting away from the internal combustion engine and the exhaust of carbon dioxide.
Thank you. I'm probably not being perfectly specific. There's things that are termed renewable and legislated as renewable that have a certain amount of carbon embedded in them versus other things. And we seem to be stuck on this idea that renewable is the thing that we should do, which I'm perfectly happy with. What I'm saying is, if we're really going to target it and we're going to meet the requirements that you're saying, I want to be sure that I'm counting carbon. Why not?
Are you talking about natural gas?
Natural gas, you name it.
Yeah. I don't count natural gas as a renewable energy.
I don't think
It has a lower carbon footprint than CO2, but I just think we ought to get away from all fossil fuels, natural gas, coal, petroleum, diesel, petroleum in all its different forms, and get to the sun and wind and energy in the ocean and geothermal and those non-carbon, non-fossil fuel sources.
Okay. This
And
question.
hydraulic, water.
This question is for Herman. How and who coordinates National Guard with local emergency management?
So when there's an emergency and there's an activation of the EOC, if there is a need for the National Guard, it would come to us. And then what we would do is we would go and do an RFA, request for assistance, that goes up to the state, HAEMA, and then they would then deploy the National Guard. And so in our case, in Hurricane Olivia, the National Guard, we asked for the National Guard. It was deployed here, and they were sent out to Hana they were pre-staged there in the event that they were needed in case there were some rescues that was needed.
This is for Chris. Where can we get more details on customer demand response programs? You might want to say, what is a demand response program?
So basically, demand response is people that enroll in our demand response program, when they receive a signal from the utility, they're guaranteed that they will turn off so many kilowatt, megawatt usage. So if we're running into a shortfall where there's just not enough generation, and we see the load increasing more and more, we can make a call for the demand response program, and these customers will actually start turning off their equipment across the island. Basically kind of bringing balance back to that generation and customer load. So, sorry, I don't know where, I think they could go to the website, to the MauiElectric.com website, and find information about the demand response program.
And we also have some representatives in the back of the room. Yeah, thank you, Mikey, for raising your hand.
Backstanding.
They can, I'm sure that they don't mind staying a little after if you're interested in approaching them tonight.
This question is for each of you. It says, how do the planning efforts of stakeholders have aligned with the time frame of increasing climate events as we get closer to 1.5 and 2 degrees in 2030, 2040? Do you feel that you can research, analyze in your roles currently, and implement mitigation strategies in time to respond to increasing frequency of disasters? It's time on your side. And they're asking for each stakeholder here.
Sure, I'll start. I think we have a lot of reason to be optimistic. I think Hawaii is a leader, and we can do it. We just all need to realize that this isn't sort of something they have to worry about. This is something each and every one of us has to worry about. There's some very likely to be inconvenient laws and policies that need to be passed. The carbon tax, hopefully it'll be a fee and dividend where a lot of it comes back to us, but we need to change the structure of our economy from a consumptive economy to a circular economy, to a nature-based economy, to one that carbon is your, one of the things that is evaluated in terms of your role in the economy. But I think we totally can do it. And I will end with the studies show that the one most important thing that any community can have is awareness and love for each other, and we have that in spades, right? And we have a cultural background of aloha in this state that we can build on. We need to treasure that and build on that, and that's the basis for which we can really move forward into a very beautiful future, I believe.
So basically, for reducing some of the carbon emissions actually come from our power plants. We've been really encouraged by the adoption of photovoltaic across the islands, across the whole state. For Maui Electric, we've seen it's basically been exponential. Starting in 2001 with our first NEM customer, we start out with maybe a few, maybe 10 or kilowatts, but we're over 100 megawatts now. It's really encouraging, and it's not going to stop. It's going to keep growing to the point where now we can actually look at safely turning off an entire power plant in the year 2022. So I think we're making great strides in reducing our carbon emissions.
I think from the county's perspective, we definitely can make big strides. We have to make sure that everybody's aware of what we want to make sure that everybody's desires are heard. People come to the council, say what those issues are. Tell people what you're needing in your communities. Make sure that those high priority things happen first. From the county perspective, we need to do the right resources. We need to find the right renewable resources to use. Solar is wonderful. I think the new projects that we're going to see come on are going to be great. We just need to have that desire and make sure that the county council funds the programs, like I was mentioning, to reduce energy use, to be innovative, to collaborate with the utility, do those things. And does take funds, and those should be prioritized in the right places. And that's gonna take everybody here going to council, making sure that you're saying, these are the priorities of the community. And I want you to spend our money this way.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think for the decision makers, whether it be politicians or the private sector where you have CEOs or COOs making decisions, they need to have the best information available to be able to have either the political will or political courage to make a decision and be able to have information that backs up that decision, that's compelling. Or whether it's in the private sector and they need to say, hey, we need to invest our resources here as opposed to there. I think we need to acknowledge that there are going to be difficult decisions that need to be made. An example, if Wailuku River or Yao Stream reroutes itself like it did during recent flooding, and we have damage to homes in those areas, should we rebuild in those areas where we know there's probably going to be future flooding again? Those are difficult decisions, right? We have cultural attachment, we have people who lived there for generations, but does it make sense to rebuild? And that you often see that in disaster response, right? We're going to rebuild our community, we're going to make it stronger. Well, let's do that in as smart a way as possible, right? Not just put back what was there. So some of those difficult decisions are going to be made, but the first step is the vulnerability assessment, having good and accurate information. There was one more point I wanted to make, and that was, I'm going to pass it on to Carlos and see if it comes back.
You're too young for that to happen. Yeah. It gets worse.
Yeah.
I know.
I think that we really need to continue learning and understanding and incorporating that new knowledge in our decisions. Just today, earlier, I was discussing with another group of people, and we were discussing about how 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we didn't have Google Earth, for instance, all of the information that now is available, and we can go and check houses in another continent and see them. Incredible things. I was doing a project in Madagascar, I remember, and they didn't even have mapped the schools and hospitals. And if you want to start, the traditional way to go and do the surveys and all that, it will take years to map those things. But now Google Earth was available, and we put a group of students of the university to go and check and find those things, the hospitals and the schools, and take the coordinates. And it was incredibly easier and shorter to map all of those critical facilities. And this is growing every day, the amount of information that we have. And we should take advantage of that and learn and understand that and incorporate that in our decisions. Before people were mentioning about, how much it will take to retrofit or to fix our facilities, or, that we now understand that they are in a vulnerable situation. That is very difficult and very costly and takes a lot of time. And we should be very, very selective in how we do that things, because if we want to retrofit a school, that takes a lot of time, and put a lot of children in a difficult situation without a place to go on to study, for instance, as an example. So yes, we need to retrofit or strengthen some of the most important and critical facilities. But the most important thing is the way we do the things from now on. We are continuing investing, and the system will continue growing. How we do those new infrastructure, that growth, to use our new knowledge and stop making the same mistakes that we did we did in the past, we made in the past, that is much more cost effective than, trying to retrofit everything that was wrong. So making the changes, and that applies to everything in life. If you were doing investments, I don't know, in the stock market for your whole life, then you understand more things. You change even those things, in a better way to have better results. That applies to everything. As I said, new information is becoming available every day. New understanding has to be achieved and shared and disseminated so everybody can make more informed decisions. And I'm sure, those new investments that better inform growth and plans will result in less risk in the future. So that I think is the most effective and least costly. Do the right thing. Doesn't cost much. Is the best way to reduce the risk and to manage the risk.
Thank you, Carlos. Herman?
In today's paper, the Advertiser, I saw that there was an article on the front page about the record number of storms that have come to Hawaii. And indeed, we've seen a dramatic increase in these storms. We always monitor the East Pacific. We see when the storms start to develop. And it's not until it hits the 140 longitude that's when we go into other mode. And there's been many of those types of situations. The ones that the public know, we've noticed more of is the three storms, the three hurricanes that came through Hawaii this past year. But there have been many others. And so this tells us that something's going on. Storms thrive, hurricanes rather, thrive on warm waters. Warm waters the thing that kills these hurricanes are like cooler waters and wind shear. And so we're seeing that because of the warmer waters, that's the reason why there's more storms, more hurricanes that are developing. And so that tells us that something's going on in the world. With respect to what we can do as an agency, we continue to prepare our residents, and this includes our visitors as well. A quarter of our population right now is visitors, and so it's important that that they're ready, and also we are focusing on hazard mitigation as well. Things that we can do to lessen the effects of hurricanes or other emergencies in our community.
Okay, so in addition to what Chris said about what Maui Electric is doing, I'd like to just add that, of course, from a renewable energy perspective, is pursuing that 100%, but balancing getting to 100% with reliable service to all customers, as well as affordable bill or keeping the cost at a reasonable price for all of you. So that's kind of the challenge. When I'm asked what's the biggest challenge in operating the utility, I say it's balancing those three factors. And of course, giving you folks, our customers, choices. As Dr. Fletcher said, I'd like to echo the awareness and aloha that we have in Hawaii that makes it special, because it's going to take all of us accepting some form of responsibility and helping to make these projects a reality. Yesterday I was fortunate to be part of a couple of dedications of utility scale projects, and Daniel there from Mayfor is in the room. It was special because with the blessing of those projects, I think Kahu Wilmot, Kahai Ali'i shared sort of the same sentiment that it's going to take all of us coming together, right? And you folks know, living in Hawaii, and I'll say, especially on Maui, that specialness about coming together and having aloha for each other. It's in us, and I think that's why we're all living here. So really look forward to continuing this type of discussion and dialogue and information sharing, because I think that's part of it.
Thank you. We have 4 final questions this evening. This looks like something for Chris. What challenges do renewable energy resources pose to energy resilience? Could they serve to make the electricity network less resilient? Operationally, can we achieve RPS renewable goals faster without jeopardizing resiliency? So specific to how it affects us.
Can you repeat the first part?
No. What challenges do renewable energy resources pose to energy resilience?
I wouldn't call them challenges, I would call them, they actually kind of benefit the system as opposed to being a challenge. Like I said, they add diversity. So the idea of, you look across and people say, like, we talk to mainland utilities, it's like, well, how come you have so much distributed generation? How can your system handle that? One of the biggest things is we've got it everywhere. It's very difficult for a single cloud to come over and diminish the generation from all these facilities. It'd have to be a huge storm to be able to do that. So I think that's what adds to this resiliency, is basically the geographic diversity.
Thank you. Dr. Fletcher, this is for you because it says Fletcher. How concerned are you about the CO2 contribution of the maritime industry? Globally, 3% may scale to 17% in the next decade.
Very. That industry as a group, though, have pledged to cut their emissions by 2050. I can't remember the exact number, but they're definitely aware of their problem. The airline industry is another one where there's lots of great technology, R&D going on, but we won't have any immediate solutions to either of those industries in the next decade or two. The maritime industry, maybe more quickly, they could go under sail. They could probably, at least partially. And there are prototypes out there where, Matson could employ the wind more than it currently does. But it's a concern. They are a lifeline for us, and that's another reason why we could be more resilient by eating our own food and making our own goods and services.
Thank you. Hang on to that microphone. This is for yourself and Carlos. We talk a lot about managed retreat from shorelines, but what does that look like realistically?
I don't know, but we're going to find out. That's not a flippant answer. We have not really figured this one out. And so there's a little advertisement for a conference that's happening, I think, in a week or two over in Lahaina called Retreating from the Shoreline, something like that. And right now, there's a lot playing out on Sunset Beach on the North Shore of Oahu. The DLNR has allowed several dozen homeowners to put very thick geotextile cloth in front of their homes in lieu of a seawall. They have permission to keep that cloth there for 3 years. The waves in August were such that they stripped the beach in front of those homes. This was in August, mind you, on the North Shore. And these homes were almost undermined, dozens of them. And that's when they were all allowed to put this cloth up there. And for the first time in our history, the state and the city and county of Honolulu were on the same page in terms of how are we going to manage the shoreline. And what happens after the 3 years, or what happens if the cloth is torn down by a large swell event? We've had one over the last two days, and there's another one coming in a day. Sorry, I just rambled at this point because I don't have a nice, concise answer for you. But whoever asked that question, I'm happy to talk some more with you afterwards.
Carlos, is there something you want to add?
Not much, really. As always, we need to learn more and understand more the problem. And it's not only a technical one, and this is an important change that I've seen happening. For many years, people thought that this was just a technical issue and, for technical people. And we were ignoring the socio-economic aspects of this. And we have seen lately more and more incorporation of the social sciences in this, and this is very important. The cultural aspects, the social aspects of this. We were doing some studies in West Maui, for instance, and we have to link all of these with social problems like affordable housing and all of those things. Everything has to be coordinated. We can't approach just the problem from the one specific side. We have to make all the considerations. It was interesting in West Maui. 40% of the labor force has to commute. They don't live there, and that's why all the road is always terrible traffic. So this is a very difficult problem that has to be hand in hand with all of these technical issues and technical solutions. So we really need to understand those better and come with solutions that make sense.
Thank you, Carlos. Our final two questions, still on managed retreat. This one is for the utility and county. It says, what are you doing in regards to managed retreat of your critical facilities in natural disaster zones? Power plants, substations, wastewater plants, pump houses, water facilities. So is the county planning to address it? Does the utility have plans?
From the utility aspect, we are closing the Kahului Power Plant in the year 2022. Basically, that's been an inundation. It's been a known inundation hazard for quite a while. But it will also serve the critical need for supplying power to the island. So part of our mitigation plan is to close that down.
I could try some and you can go. All right, let's see how it goes. I know the administration over the last years has been acquiring land, shoreline land, both to preserve that or limit future development, but also then how to move roads, away from the shorelines. So those are some of the areas, and so that's going to take time. From a wastewater treatment and other facilities, there are plans on how to consider different locations, change pumping directions, and arrive at, in a future plan, having those facilities away from the shorelines. Maybe Herman, you could add more, I think.
I think you got most of it, but yeah, I did want to echo what you were talking about, how this administration, Mayor Arakawa, has been trying to acquire many of our coastal lands. And the whole purpose behind that is so that, to keep it in conservation, number one, but also so that people don't build in those areas. And so that's one of the ways in which we're trying to, I guess, stay away from any construction along the shoreline. With respect to the wastewater plant, as I mentioned before, there's always been discussions about moving the plant further inland. And because right now it is vulnerable where it is right now, it is in a tsunami inundation zone. Luckily, when tsunami occurred back in 2011, it wasn't damaged too much. I know it is a great cost to try to move that plant further inland. So that's the reason why, although there's been a lot of discussion, we haven't gotten to the point yet where we made a decision to move that wastewater plant further inland.
Sharon, did you want to add anything?
I can just add, as I mentioned earlier, New Generation is not near the coast. The two solar farms that we're in negotiation with, one is upcountry on Ulupalakua Ranch property, and the other in central Maui near Kuehilani Highway. Maui Electric also owns property across the central Maui landfill, and that was already zoned industrial and can be made available for future development, whether it's by the utility or by a third party for New Generation.
Thank you. We're down to our final question, and this person who wrote the card also put a note here. It says, to all panelists, mahalo for your time. I just want to relay that message. This question is for all stakeholders. Community plans for the County of Maui and Maui Island in particular tonight are now being updated for the next 20 years. Matter of fact, West Maui is currently updating its plan now. What are you doing to ensure your facilities and needs for resiliency are taking into consideration the planning phases of the community plans? How are you working in conjunction with these community plans being developed here? And do you make an effort, and what does that look like? Shall we start with, Dr. Fletcher isn't involved with community, but Dr. Fletcher, just from your perspective, what about community involvement in planning?
If I may, I'd just like to remark that on Oahu, you never would have a panel of resource people from different sectors choosing to comment in an informed and articulate way about retreating from the shoreline. You would never get it. And you guys are so far advanced, you all have positions, you have intelligent things to say about it. That wouldn't happen on Oahu. Everybody would sort of pass the microphone to me.
Oh, Maui no Ko'oi, I don't know what to say.
I have to tell you, I'm having sort of a moment. So, yeah, good on you. Yeah, the community plans. Department of Planning and Permitting for the City and County of Honolulu is, it works its way around the island with renewing the community plans. DPP has not yet built in resilience, climate change oriented threads. They talk the talk and they want to see the community put that into their community plans, but they are really still sort of getting organized for how are we going to approach this problem with sea level rise and disaster preparedness and stresses and shocks. The city is defining its actions in terms of stresses, which is sort of long-term, persistent challenges like sea level rise and social inequity and homelessness, rising heat stress in the urban core, and shocks, which is obviously, what used to not be a damaging tsunami becomes more and more damaging every decade simply by the fact that it's riding on higher sea level and hurricanes. But there is a new community plan being developed for the primary urban corridor, Diamond Head to Pearl Harbor. Sea Grant has been asked to write a series of white papers on various elements of shocks and stressors to that community. And DPP is working hard on incorporating these through a series of town hall meetings. They just had one a week ago.
Maui Lecture?
Sorry, I just drew a blank.
All right, I'll
It's operational plan.
think for a moment. So I think
Keep track of that time.
I for myself, being involved in those community plans, going to meetings that would affect me are I think extremely important. But I think a little bit what I want to say here is the picture I was showing of all those spots where the community centers are. The important thing I would want to say in my community to at those meetings is you're going to have to retreat, yes or yes, sometime in your life to one of these facilities. That facility has a roof, has some windows. It's not necessarily built for what you might want to hotel for a period of time. That's not its purpose necessarily, right? And they're not built necessarily with all the backup power and all those things, but maybe as a community, you might want that. And going to these community meetings, going to the planning meetings, coming out with that desire that, when there's an emergency, you want a place to retreat to that has power, perhaps it's watered, perhaps can flush the toilets, can house a number of people, that's a useful facility, more than just, hey, it's got a roof and windows. It's something that I think is going to be needed. Please, be part of that community that says, I want these things, these are the priorities, that please spend my money this way.
From a community planning aspect, Maui Electric is quite involved in it. I mean, we take seriously our obligation to serve electric power to the residents of Maui County. So we do attend, we do try to make plans on forecasting where the growth is going to be so we can be there and available for when people need power. We have a special initiative going on in Molokai where we're actually going out and actually engaging the community on what they want to see as their energy future. Quite interesting. When you ask 100 people, we get like pretty close to 99 different answers. So, but it's all really valuable because it kind of knows that we're basically heading in the right direction. It's just a matter of technology, timing, and opportunity.
Yeah, in terms of integrating with the community plan efforts, from the Hypercom perspective, I feel that we're there to help inform residents and decision makers in the community so that they can in turn go to those community plan meetings and help to shape what those plans look like. And so that's part of the role. Also with my work at the Department of Water Supply with the county, we have plans that are developed, for example, the Water Use and Development Plan, that feed into the community plans. And the community plans feed into the Water Use and Development Plans. So the planning department, when they're involved in updating those plans, are looking at a lot of existing documents from various sectors, and that helps to inform how those plans are shaped. Like we mentioned, for example, with Shoreline Retreat, some of the difficult decisions that may need to be made, and we've also talked about the high cost of investing in putting in a new water treatment facility, for example, moving that facility. I think part of those decisions need to be informed by the avoided cost of doing those things, as opposed to waiting for disaster to strike and then having a much steeper cost in terms of loss of services and cleanup, etc. So that avoided cost piece, I think, is critical to help us inform where we're allocating our resources, and hopefully that feeds into those community plan efforts.
Thank you. I always see planning as an opportunity to do things better, and we should take advantage of that. I see our job, our contribution by providing information that will help to make improved decisions, better planning, and better investments. So, but that has to be, when we do that, when we provide information, that has to be done also in a responsible way. Usually we tend to think that what we do is the most important thing. Disaster is the most important thing and has to be done for climate change, whatever we do. That's not true. A community, a society has so many problems and priorities, and we have to be responsible enough to discuss and collaborate with the planners, with the decision makers, to keep the right level of priority to disaster management or climate change, compared to all the needs that a community has. And so, again, I see planning as an opportunity to improve, to make changes, and but our work should be always to provide the information that will help the people to make the right decisions.
My agency has provided comments to the community plan, or would provide comments for to the community plan. We're looking at, for instance, looking at population growth, where you're expecting to put housing. There is a need for shelters, more shelters here in Maui. So that's some of the things that we would talk about that should be included in the plan. That if they want to, I guess, promote housing in a certain area, that they should look at sheltering. They should also look at sirens. If they plan to put a government building in there, perhaps make the building hurricane-proof, things like that. That's the kind of things that we would make comments respect to the community plan.
To add, what Maui Electric does is, through our government relations and our planning groups, we have people involved in reviewing the county's plans and making sure that they align with ours. And we're fortunate that because we have a good relationship with them, that they've asked us to review parts on the infrastructure. So we have those opportunities to align our plans with what the county community plans are reflecting.
And before we turn over to Alex and Sharon for their closing remarks, they just have a moment each. I do want to point out that when we're working with community plans and trying to develop plans, when you're talking about utilities and infrastructure and government and larger entities, it's a very difficult thing because this is long-term, long-range planning. We can't pop out of nowhere and come up with something. And it's running parallel to rapid technology changes as well. So for in this day and age to be agile and mobile and responsible and responsive takes quite a bit of doing. And to demonstrate the project that Chris was talking about on Molokai, we had this ambitious idea that we would ask the people of Molokai what did they see as being 100% renewable ahead of 2045 because there was opportunity. So we have been for the last 2 years bringing a team on Molokai. We started by hosting 13 roundtables, spoke to 150 people at these 90-minute sessions, collected about 450 comments, and then went to Honolulu as a team and presented it to our professional company planners and said, hello, these are the things that Molokai folks want us to keep in mind. Could you help us reflect that in a plan going forward in the future that's really not that predictable, but clearly with a path forward that needed to be determined? So we made a deliberate decision that we needed to combine our expertise with the expert knowledge of their lifestyles and needs on that island. But it is a long and difficult process because every comment needed to be accounted for, and it was very difficult. And we're still in that process. And it's going really well. It's just a process. So I'm going to turn over to Alex to offer some closing comments, and then to Sharon. And we want to mahalo all of you. Alex?
Thank you, Lena. Well, closing comments would be thank you to all of you for being here this evening. This is really one of the primary goals of our effort is to get people engaged. Great questions this evening. These are ones that can help push our research and our thinking as well. So thank you for that. I'm going to reiterate the Kuhea Hypercom Challenge here, that anyone interested in being involved in the Hypercom working group or research efforts, please reach out to us. You can contact me at my last name, DeRode, at hawaii.edu. And otherwise, feel free to come speak to us after the event if you, as an individual or as part of an organization or company, would like to help inform this research and this community process. And this is an example. This forum right here is an example of what can come out of it. So, mahalo to everybody.
Okay, so ditto. Thank you very much, and especially all of you here for staying with us. It's like 2.5 hours or longer, so we appreciate your interest, your questions. Please also join me in thanking the panelists, one who flew in from but we really hope that you learned something from tonight's forum and can take that something and maybe take action like the challenge that Alex and Kuhea came up with. But really look forward to having more of these types of forums and their discussions. So this is a first. We think that there's enough interest. It helps to make us better planners, not just at the utility, but I think for the county. So thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. Mahalo.
And I do want to recognize Kuhea Asiu from Maui Electric's Community Relations team. She is the reason you had a fabulous dinner. and the reason that we have these terrific panelists here. So again, we mahalo them, especially Dr. Fletcher for flying in this evening from Oahu, and who will now fly back and say, oh, Maui no ka oe. Thank you, everybody. Drive safe. Good night.